Today on Locked On Knicks, I team up with Kane Pitman of the Locked On Bucks podcast to break down how Giannis Anterokounmpo could potentially find his way to the New York Knicks, how his game will age, and who on the Knicks roster the Milwaukee Bucks might covet. That next.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into a Locked On Bucks and Locked On Knicks crossover. This has been highly anticipated and let me also say highly requested, particularly from the Bucks fans. But I do feel like this is a period of time where the Bucks and the Knicks have plenty to talk about. Maybe not for the first time. Yes, we're going to talk about Giannis today. We're also just going to dive into the fact that the Knicks and the Bucks, from a roster perspective, pretty quiet over the summer. Not a whole lot of changes. So where are the Knicks at? Where are the Bucks at? We've got plenty of questions. My name's Kane Pitman. I'm the host of Locked On Bucks. You can find me on that show Monday to Friday. And alongside me, Gavin Schall from Locked On Knicks, two of the great podcasts on the Locked On Podcast Network. So we're going to dive straight into it. First, we thank everyone for making Locked On Bucks or Locked On Knicks your first watch or first listen of every day. We appreciate the support. And if you haven't done so yet, drop a like, a comment, subscribe, rate, review, do all those things because it's free to do and it helps the shows continue to grow. And by the way, particularly on YouTube, don't forget to drop in your comments and suggestions for the shows because we're getting close to the regular season, but it's still the off season. And let's face it, it's been a little bit quiet. We need all the help we can get for show topics going through the next few weeks into the preseason and then the regular season. But Gavin, I believe this is the first crossover we've done for a long, long time. And it is interesting times because when we think about the Bucks and the Knicks, there's been a lot of Giannis hype over the years. And I feel like this is the best place to start. We've discussed Giannis a lot on this podcast the last few weeks for obvious reasons.
I think so. Yeah.
How much has Giannis been a topic on Locked On Knicks?
We did a full episode on it, and I was waiting to have a chance to talk to you, Kane, to do another one. But yeah, that's where my head's been at. It's been about 25 years in New York now where we've been talking about trading for a superstar. Obviously, got Melo, signed Amari. Neither one totally got us to the promised land. And now that the Knicks organization is in the most stable place it's been for years, tons of young talent. Out of all the teams to make the second round, the Knicks were clearly the youngest. And despite that stability, all the talk is still about a superstar because you do need that guy to push you over the top. And Giannis has done it before and clearly has the potential to do it again. So I guess I'd want to start off with just kind of like a broad perspective on it. What does Milwaukee have to get done this year to keep Giannis in that podcast interview? He made a reference to people in the organization, or he didn't even say that. I'll say the quote directly. People aren't as committed as I am to get that golden thing back. Was that just him kind of pushing his chips in for the Bucks to trade whatever assets they have available to be all in on this season? Was it a shot at specific players on the team? What does he want? What do the Bucks think they need to do? How is this all going to play out?
Well, it's been a fascinating offseason from the perspective of change for the Milwaukee Bucks because we can talk about the playing roster, and Milwaukee had their hands tied a little bit. They weren't able to do a lot. They didn't have a lot of flexibility, and really the big two targets for the offseason was re-sign Chris Middleton, re-sign Brook Lopez. But the major change they made was bringing in Adrian Griffin, who, if you listen to the reports and you believe some of the talk around the team, Giannis was on board with this in terms of bringing in Adrian Griffin as someone that they can hopefully build a strong relationship. So they did make a major change. And I think for the Bucks, that was something that they probably needed to do. I was always someone that probably supported Mike Budenholzer more than a section of Bucks fans. I think he's a fantastic coach. But I also think that this is a change that probably had to happen after 5 years. So as far as this year, the Bucks will enter with, for the most part, the same roster. The expectations are still very, very high. They are aging. They need to stay healthy. That is the biggest question mark, particularly with Chris Middleton, who's had some, I think, unlucky injuries over the last few years. So they need to be healthy. But if this Bucks team with Giannis, Holiday, Middleton, Lopez, the role players that they have, I don't think there's anyone that doesn't think this is a top 2 or 3 team in the East. At worst, maybe the best team in the Eastern Conference. So they're going to be in a position to win another title. Winning a title would help, but they still have 2 years with Giannis under contract. So this summer was not really the summer that we expected that things were going to kick off from this perspective. But I personally like the fact that Giannis has put the Bucks under pressure. Now, I don't suspect that these comments were a surprise to Milwaukee. I would imagine that the front office is feeling under pressure and they understand that you need to keep finding out ways to rejuvenate this roster this aging roster and keep the Bucks in contention. Otherwise, he's not going to hang around. So I personally just was not that surprised by the comments. It hasn't put me off, or certainly if I was, the Bucks fans that listen to our show, I wouldn't be too concerned about it. I think it makes sense.
Yeah, I think my concern, if this is me, putting on my Milwaukee Bucks hat here, right? I want to keep you honest, right? Let's just say they do win a championship here. It doesn't change some of the long-term realities for Milwaukee, right? Like when Giannis's contract is up, I think Drew Holiday is going to be 35. Chris Middleton with some knee issues is going to be 34. Holiday will be in like year 17. Middleton, I think year 13 or 14 at that point. Is there like a trade, like even let's just say Milwaukee does it and wins another title this year, does that guarantee Giannis's loyalty going forward? Or do you think it's contingent on like, hey, we need to find a way to get a star who's on my timeline or maybe even a little bit younger in this building who's going to support me the few years after? And then maybe even the worst case scenario, like how far does Milwaukee have to get for Giannis to like say like, all right, this is going the right direction? Like they get to game 7 of the conference finals. Is that enough? I know it's an arbitrary marker, Kane. I know there's no way to really answer that, but I'm kind of curious, like, all right, what exactly do we have to do here to ensure this guy's a Buck for life?
So I'm curious because in a perfect world, Giannis would play for the Bucks forever and everyone's happy. But if the Bucks win another title this year, I don't know whether it guarantees Giannis staying in Milwaukee long term. But I think it might guarantee the satisfaction of Bucks fans long term, because I think at the moment, the way I always look at this, it is impossibly hard to win an NBA title. I don't need to tell Knicks fans that. But the Bucks won that one title, and I didn't think that the Bucks were ever going to win a title as the small market that they are. How was this going to happen? So Giannis has come, he's done that, they've won a title. That's unbelievable. But once you win one, there is an impatience for a second one. There is this feeling that you always want a little bit more. And one title out of 5 years of really regular season dominance is disappointing. If they were able to make it 2, I think Giannis is going to be a legend in Milwaukee forever. But if he got to the point where he's like, well, I've won 2 titles, the roster has run its course, there's really no assets to make this team better, I think that Giannis is going to be loved in Milwaukee no matter what. But if you win a title, it's hard for me to say, does this mean that he is more likely to stay, or it means that he feels more comfortable perhaps moving on if he doesn't see the future in Milwaukee? I think it's impossible to tell.
We've seen it with LeBron, right? Like he won the 2 in Miami, and there was still vitriol when he left there. He won the 1 in Cleveland, and it was a little bit different because like it was him making things right, and they were kind of okay with it when he left. They said, yeah, you know what, you did the thing, it's all good. And I think there will be some of that either way. But let's just say, just indulge me here, things do go a little bit wrong for Milwaukee like this season, and Giannis goes into next summer and says, hey, I want to trade. Do you think Milwaukee, maybe to your point, says like, you know what, we've gotten everything we wanted out of this, let's rebuild, let's get a head start by trading him? Or do they go the other way and say like, hey, we are like, odds are like over the next 50 years we might never have another player like Giannis, let's go all in on one more year, try to win a title, and if he leaves, he leaves after that season?
I might be wrong, but it's hard for me to predict that the Milwaukee Bucks are going to be in a position where they're contending to win titles when Giannis isn't on the team. So I understand why a lot of people would disagree with me on this point or this take. And I understand that it might not be the best for the business. But if things are still okay and it's not an impossibly bad situation from a relationship point of view, if it gets to that point, then obviously you need to trade. I can't really envision that with Giannis and the way he feels about the city and the team and his teammates. I don't see it getting to a problematic stage. But for me, keep Giannis on the roster and ride it out. That is what I would do, because I just feel like even if he's happy and maybe he'll leave after this contract. I'm not sure. I wouldn't begrudge him for doing that. Yeah. But I would say, look, let's keep Giannis for another season. We're going to give ourselves a better shot to win a title with Giannis than trying to pick up draft picks. The Bucks haven't drafted well in the past. They got Giannis at 15, which is enough to keep you happy for a lifetime. But historically, they haven't really drafted well. I'd be riding it out. But the only way I can see them trading him is if the relationship stuff does get to a bad point. Or maybe it's out of respect for Giannis. If he says, look, I've done a lot for this franchise. Can we do this? And maybe you do that to appease him, which I also would understand.
Yeah, I look at it more like a Donovan Mitchell situation than a Damian Lillard situation, where Donovan Mitchell said, hey, like, I'm not going to throw a fit. I'm going to show up. I'm going to do my job. But just so you know, I'm heading out when this contract's over if you want to get something for me. And honestly, I think You alluded to it. Like I heard Zach Lowe talk about his podcast the other day. Giannis is doing Milwaukee a service here to some extent. Like there's no like, I don't know. I love it here. Milwaukee's my home. Milwaukee's always going to be my home, but I like to win. Like he's being like very explicit and very direct and saying like, hey, here's the deal. Like winning's my number one priority. And look, we're that's going to be tested, right? If winning's really his number one priority, maybe he should be headed to Oklahoma City when this is all said and done, or somewhere like that. Like we'll see. Like is that market contingent? To that point, like he's been in Milwaukee this long because they've built around him and they found ways to win around him. And I just don't see like there are going to be teams that can talk themselves into like, even if Giannis is very explicit and says like, I want to go Miami, New York, or LA, right? Those are the three teams that are most mentioned for him. Like there could be another team, like it could be Toronto again, that could talk themselves into kind of like a Kawhi 1 year scenario, except like for Milwaukee, I just don't see the incentive there to accept whatever the modern version is of like a DeMar DeRozan, Jakob Poeltl, and a pick or two package. Like if I'm Milwaukee and I'm trading him a year early, to your point, it's out of respect for Giannis, and it's because some team is giving me every pick they have, every pick swap they have, and some young assets. And maybe Kane, we can get into it after the break, whether or not the New York Knicks are equipped to do that for Milwaukee if they decide to go down that road.
I think it's a perfect way to move on in this conversation, because I think for Knicks fans, this is a fascinating position. You've been here before, as you mentioned, not just with Giannis, but with various stars and trying to position yourself. And maybe I'm a little bit soft when it comes to Giannis. I think that he's done more than anyone could have ever expected for this franchise. So to me, I can't find myself in a position where I could get mad about any of these comments he's making, because the way I look at it, all these media outlets and the national media, they were going to be talking about the Giannis contract regardless of what he said. He's being honest, and also he's putting pressure on the organization, which to me is the right thing to do. So I think Giannis so far, I'm fine with the way that he's played it in terms of the Bucks, but I think it's fascinating moving forward. So let's get to the Knicks perspective coming up next after we talk about Jase Medical, our sponsor of today's podcast. And everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jase Medical offers the Jase case. The Jase case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jase Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. It's very simple. They handle everything from online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. So don't get caught underprepared. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using the code LOCKEDON at checkout on jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com, and use the promo code LOCKEDON there. All right, let's get to the juicy part of this. I think for Knicks fans and Bucks fans. So you mentioned the idea of the Knicks always chasing, and I feel like I should be careful what I wish for, because I enjoy watching the Knicks. I love going to games and covering games at Madison Square Garden because the atmosphere is just unbelievable, even when the team has stunk over the years. So the idea of the Knicks being a really good, powerful team is fun. Maybe I'll regret that when they finally do land a superstar and they are a powerhouse and you very quickly get sick of it.
Yeah, I'm going to be really annoying if that happens, Kane.
That's exactly right.
We're blowing up the Locked On DM every single day, so just be ready for that. But go ahead.
But where are you guys at in terms of the Giannis chase? And I've got part 8 on our graphic here. But where are you guys at in the Giannis chase again and trying to position yourself? And how excited are you by the prospect of a 30, 31-year-old Giannis and potentially trading what we would think would be a big package for him?
I think that's what makes this stuff so difficult, right? Because we've heard the talk of it's mostly been about Joel Embiid this offseason for the New York Knicks, right? He's a guy who, like, that situation, like whatever is wrong in Milwaukee, like that situation seems much more right for imminent detonation than whatever's going on with the Bucks. And we're talking about guys who have won MVPs in the last few years, are consistently mentioned in the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players in the NBA. Giannis, more than Joel, has proven it on the biggest stage imaginable. Like with everything Nikola Jokic did, if you want to make a case for Giannis as the best player in the world, like people still have to listen to it. It's a guy coming off a 31, 12, and 6 season. And yet, like much like with Joel Embiid, I don't really have any questions about the Knicks acquiring him because he's just so good. You have to do it. But I do wonder how he's going to age and how it would play out. And this is kind of what I wanted to throw at you before we talk about package. And not that this would affect package, because like there's just so many teams in the league are going to be all in on him. Milwaukee's going to, like, when they decide where they want to trade him, they're going to name a price, and the other team, assuming it's a place Giannis wants to resign, they're just going to have to say yes. And that's going to be how that goes down in all likelihood. But just going through the numbers on Gian, let me just take you down this road real quick. Both in terms of volume and efficiency, his 3-point shooting has gone down 4 straight years now. His 2-point percentage last season was the worst it's been in 5 years. His free throw shooting is substantially worse than it was earlier in his career. Back in 2017, I didn't realize it ever got this high. He was 77% on 8 attempts per game last year, 64.5% on 12 a game, career high in turnovers last season at just under 4 a game. 4th straight year playing less than 70 games. Most concerning to me, because I think this is the best indicator of athleticism that we have in terms of just like raw, like basic numbers. Worst block and steal numbers he's had since his rookie year was under 1 with both of them. And I guess what that brings me to is, how does his game evolve into his 30s for a guy who doesn't seem like he's ever going to be a shooter, who's like, obviously has incredible size, incredible strength. That's not going away anytime soon. Incredible determination, grit, basketball IQ. Going to be a freak, I think, as long as he's in the NBA to some extent. But if he's just a little bit less of a freak, Kane, like, how does that affect his value? Does that take him from top 2-3 guy in the world to more like top 10-12 guy in the world? Like, what do you think the long-term trajectory for Giannis is?
It's fascinating because when you talk about, as you kind of referenced, the work ethic and the desire and the commitment, he's top 1 in the NBA. The guy is an absolute machine when it comes to preparing his body. He is someone that has played through injuries before. He's played through knee soreness for a number of years now. We know he obviously had a back injury last year in the postseason. He had the wrist injury. And the concern that I've always had for Giannis is just purely for his own welfare. The way that he plays, he's on the floor multiple times a game. He's flying through the air. And it does just strike you as a game that isn't necessarily going to age well. Now, he has defied all that to this point in time because he is different from a physical standpoint to most, certainly his ability to play through those injuries. The fact that he went through a stage a couple of seasons ago where he was shooting better from mid-range. In fact, the numbers were pretty good. He was around the mid-40s from mid-range a couple of seasons ago. Last year, that dropped off. The one thing I would say with his efficiency last year, and this is something we discussed a lot on the show, and I felt pretty strongly about it, some disagreed, was the idea that last year the Bucks to start the season were decimated by injuries. They could not get healthy. Chris Middleton was not playing at all. And I just thought that Giannis was asked and expected to take over a ridiculous load, whether it was the ball handling, whether it was the scoring, whether it was the shooting. And they did not have the floor spacing. They didn't have their secondary perimeter scorer out on the floor. So I might be found to be wrong. But I am expecting that the efficiency is going to bump up this season. I'm expecting a better year. And the other thing is just the toll on this Milwaukee Bucks team after years of making deep playoff runs, the NBA Finals, shortened NBA seasons, into the Olympic Games, into World Cups, that Giannis has been involved with over the offseason. I think that he's in a better position. I think he's finally had a chance to rest his body. So long-term, can I see Giannis playing this exact way at 34 and 35 if he doesn't have a reliable mid-range jump shot? I think the 3-point shot we've discussed a lot, but it's probably at this point in time, is he going to get to mid-30s? I don't think so. So that will be the question moving forward, which is why I think for Bucks fans, just purely if you talk about prime Giannis, the last contract was the one where you were terrified about losing this guy. He's been able to come in, win 2 MVPs, win a title. The next contract, you're talking from age 32 to 36, 37. It is a major unknown, and maybe the knees and the soreness that he's had and now in operation this offseason are the biggest question mark. So I think you're exactly right. If you're the Knicks, you're going to take him and you're going to believe that the willpower, the physical stuff that he's able to do will carry him through. But you'd be lying if you said it's not a question mark with the style and the way that he plays the game. Because I think he's significantly, and I hesitate to make this comparison, but you talk about guys that have done stuff on their athleticism. Giannis, infinitely better player, in my opinion, than Russell Westbrook. But it's challenging physically, that game, how it ages moving forward.
Yeah, that's always been my fear with him. And look, the Knicks have experienced that, right? With Amari Stoudemire, a guy who was super skilled, super hard worker. And to be clear, like, as much as Giannis has had some injury issues over the last few years, nothing compared to Stat, who was fresh off of missing a year, had to go through microfracture surgery, which I don't even think is a thing anymore and isn't really used all that often anymore. So it's a different story. It was 12 years ago at this point. But there has to be some lingering concern for that, especially when like Milwaukee, like even with a year on that deal, just to be first in line to like say like we're going to give you like the full show. Here's what it's going to be, and like we hope you sign a contract extension with us. Like I think it's going to be almost everything the Knicks have in terms of picks. And I guess I wanted to get your read on like again in a world where Milwaukee says, you know what, like out of respect for Giannis and out of respect for what it could do to our franchise compared to losing him for nothing, like we are going to trade him a year early. Like, where do you think the Knicks compare in terms of appeal, in terms of package they can offer? They have all their own picks. They have all the pick swaps. They have, I mean, I don't know how this would work next offseason because it's going to be the pick from that offseason. So maybe it would just be the Knicks making a pick from Milwaukee at that point. But they have the Dallas first, as long as it translates next year. They have the Wizards first, which is like the best case scenario on that is that it's eventually something like the 8th or 9th pick in the draft. Same with the Pistons pick in that same general area. And then they have a bunch of young guys kind of top out is probably really good. None of them necessarily project as all-star type prospects. Quentin Grimes, someone who the Knicks would love to keep around Giannis. I think they signed Dante DiVincenzo partially as insurance against the idea that they might not be able to in whatever star trade. They eventually make Immanuel Quickley, another guy who I think would actually have a much brighter future in New York because you could play him more minutes at the 2 if you're playing Giannis at the 4, given the offsetting sizes there. He's incredible, just always going to be blocked by Jalen Brunson. I know he's, we can talk about this in a sec, Kane, like a long been an apple of Bucks fans' eyes. RJ Barrett, I think one way or another would have to be out of town with Giannis. Just the lack of shooting on the wings between the two of them wouldn't make a lot of sense. And then Julius Randle, who under a different coach, you could certainly talk yourself into him and Giannis playing together, especially like, and I'm curious to get your take on this. I think Giannis is probably going to end up playing more and more center as he ages and as time goes along. For Tom Thibodeau, that's probably a no-go because he wants a Mitchell Robinson type pure rim protector at the center spot from now until the end of time. So he's someone who would have to go either in that trade, likely, or another trade, or maybe the Knicks think they could play them together. That would be pretty interesting. I would be fascinated to see how that goes. But it's an interesting cadre of pieces there for Milwaukee between all those picks and then all those young players to prime-ish guys like Randall that they could pick from.
And this is the challenging aspect if you're the Milwaukee Bucks and you're trying to say, okay, if it got to that point where you say, okay, we could trade Giannis, you're looking at a package, and honestly, you've mentioned some nice players, but I don't think there's no one really there that you're getting overly excited about. And the one guy on the Knicks that the Bucks have actually had interest in, and it's not in a Giannis trade, but it's been to bring alongside Giannis, has been Quickley, who last year they were interested in. I think the other question with the draft picks that if you've got draft picks coming back, and this is always a question with superstar trades, what picks are the Knicks going to give you? And are the Knicks going to be a really damn good team?
Well, here's the one thing I completely forgot to mention, Kane. The Knicks do have the rights to the Bucks 2025 draft pick as long as it's 6 through 30, which would be presumably very appealing for Milwaukee to get back if they're going to be bad.
That's right. Yes, give us our own pick back. That would be lovely. And this is the fascinating position Milwaukee find themselves in with the 2029 first-round pick that they have now that they could potentially trade. Is that now looking more appealing in improving the Milwaukee Bucks roster now because maybe teams think, hey, Giannis is leaving. The Bucks aren't going to be good in 2029. So this is the game that the Bucks will have to play. I guess the question I would have for you is, in a timing for a trade, when would you see that this would? I mean, I don't see in any way. There is just no way I see anything happening in this season. No. Maybe next offseason, but I still don't even buy that. I think you're looking beyond that. When are you looking at, and when you're discussing on your show, when are you looking at a timing of a potential Giannis trade?
I think next offseason, which again could be dead wrong about. I think it would take Milwaukee losing in either the first or second round again for Giannis to get to a point where he's like, guys, this isn't it. I really don't want to do this again. I'm not going to throw a fit, but like if you want to trade me, now's the time because I'm not coming back at this point. Like I just don't see it with this group. Or I think like it was a classic, and to your point, that's obviously what Giannis is doing here. Is a classic LeBron thing to be like, hey, like if we don't trade that first round pick, I might be out of town. Yeah. Like if Milwaukee doesn't find some way to meaningfully upgrade at the trade deadline this year, like I could see that spurring Giannis next offseason. Like again, if they don't make an all-in move and Milwaukee disappoints in the playoffs, I think that combination could be fatal for him wanting to stay in Milwaukee. So in my mind, that's when the Knicks would be all in on that type of move. Could it be like an early 2024-25 move if Milwaukee just isn't on the right track? maybe, but you generally I guess Kevin Durant trade aside, you usually think of those monumental deals happening more so in the offseason.
I think that's right, particularly because I think the Bucks expect, as they should, that they could potentially win a title this season as well. So the timing of this is going to be interesting. And again, it's still hard for me to picture a trade. I don't really see it happening, and I don't see Giannis being the type of guy that the relationship is going to deteriorate to that manner. I don't particularly see that with him. He is a little bit different to some of the superstars we've seen in this position before. We can continue the conversation, though, because I think there's still more to get to with the Knicks and the Bucks, particularly this season, because I think the Eastern Conference is wide open, and I'm fascinated to know how you see the landscape. First, maybe we should talk about our friends over at Birddogs.
Oh man, I got to tell you, these things have absolutely changed my life. I think in almost a year and a half of dating, I'd maybe been complimented on my clothes like twice by my girlfriend every time I throw the Birddogs on.
Nice.
I'm getting a compliment, and incredibly, they are on top of making you look great. They are exceptionally comfortable. These Birddogs stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg and give you a truly sculpted look. But they also fit way better than regular shorts that are made of stiff, restrictive cotton, because Birddog has fixed that issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki but stretches so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. My co-host Alex always talks about this. It's great if you're going to like a barbecue, right? And you don't want to look like a slob. You don't want to, which would be my inclination. I want to wear basketball shorts every second of my life. But now you can get there. You can look good. You want to shoot around a little bit. You want to play some volleyball. You still have the flexibility to do just that. I will never, ever take off the pants they've given me either. They're incredibly comfortable. They are functional for just about any occasion you can work for, whether it's a date, whether you're golfing, whether you're working out, whether you're lounging, whether you're going to work. That's what makes them great. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOnXXX or enter promo code LockedOnXXX at checkout for a free Birddogs water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnXXX for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your Birddogs off. We promise you that.
All right, so as we keep rolling here, and we should say, I haven't prompted this yet, but whether it's on the Locked On Knicks feed or Locked On Bucks feed, make sure you jump in and give us your thoughts. If you're a Knicks fan and you're starting to get really excited about the prospects of Giannis in New York, or you're a Bucks fan and you just stop talking about this, you're really starting to annoy me, let us know where you sit. We also know, and this is the case, there are some passionate Giannis fans that want to see the best for him, and there's certainly some that want to see him move on. I would say, and again, look, I've said this, I think the Knicks, to this point, a pretty highly unoffensive franchise, I should say. I think if Bucks fans had the choice between, Miami or Knicks, I think maybe the Knicks would be the preferred destination. I might be wrong.
Lesser of two evils, Kane.
hey, that's exactly the way you got to look at it.
Yeah.
Where are the Knicks at this year, though? You mentioned the roster, and Dante DiVincenzo, certainly from my perspective, a player that I'm always going to want to see play well, and he did some nice things in Golden State last year, and it was nice to see him back with Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart, and it looks like a fun reunion in New York. But where do you see this team? Because the way I look at it, and I'm not sure how you see it, but I've got the Bucks and the Celtics pretty clearly at the top of the East. Miami is obviously a wild card right now for obvious reasons. Philadelphia is just, I don't know what could happen there. Anything could happen. And then I see a mix of teams. Where have you got the Knicks?
It's a range. I could see them being anywhere from 2 to 7. I think Milwaukee has kind of been the team that I've penciled at number 1. Very similar to the Knicks. And you said at the top of the show, the continuity they have coming back. Giannis in the regular season, and in the playoffs for that matter, just an overwhelming player. I have a feeling they're going to get a healthier year out of Chris Middleton, because it's going to be hard for him to have a less healthy year. I think Drew Holiday is basically immortal. I don't really see him ever aging or ever getting any worse. And I think they're going to be really, really, really good this year. And as we talked about, they could very easily make a trade midseason that elevates them and makes them even better. And they figure out that 5th spot that's given them some trouble. So I certainly have Milwaukee penciled at 1. The reason I go as high as 2 is I think there's some real uncertainty about Boston. I think trading Marcus Smart for Kristaps Porzingis probably raises their ceiling and lowers their floor. Obviously already injury issues there. I think their offense could just be spectacular. Porzingis kind of quietly had one of the best defensive seasons of his career. Yeah. Was one of the best post-up bigs in the NBA. Was one of the best catch-and-go bigs in the NBA. Shot really well from 3. He was my hatred of him aside, or faux hatred at times. You got to keep up appearances on Locked On Knicks. he was awesome last year. So they could be really great with him, or they could struggle a bit during the regular season because the depth just isn't there in the same way. And I say all that to say, like, I think it's really the Knicks and the Cavs that are almost sure things to be good. And we did a whole pod on it this week, but I was really surprised that Vegas has the Knicks over under at just 44.5, because the Knicks, as I noted earlier, like the average age of a team that made the second round of the playoffs was 25 years old. There's a good chance Immanuel Quickley is a substantially better player after he put up basically all-star numbers in every game he started last year. I think Quentin Grimes is the Knick you're looking for most to make a leap and hopefully become Desmond Bane light. And I think he is that type of talent and potential. I think Jalen Brunson can even make another leap forward, getting to play in more lineups with extra spacing after the acquisition of Dante DiVincenzo. And this is a team that just thrived after getting Josh Hart last year, played at a 57-win pace after the All-Star break, obviously dismantled the Cavs in the first round, played the Heat pretty close despite their second and third best players either being out or playing injured. Like, I don't really have any reason to think the Knicks are going to be worse outside of just the history of the Knicks organization and the fact that every other year Julius Randle seems to suck. But I'm pretty confident that they are going to win 50 games this year, and I think be a top 4 seed.
47 wins last year, unless I'm mistaken there. So 47 wins last year, and the win total at 44.5 is pretty bizarre. I don't see the Knicks getting worse this year, particularly in an Eastern Conference that I don't think there's all of a sudden become these powerhouses coming in. So I'd agree with you there. Last one I've got for you, because we are pushing time here. Immanuel Quickley. It would be wrong of me not to ask. What would it take, and where is he on the untouchable scale with New York Knicks fans, or what's your sense being around the team?
Sure. So two different scales there. The Gavin Schall scale, don't even think about it. The New York Knicks scale, we'll talk, I think, is where they're at. Like it's been kind of the one lingering question all offseason. Still does not have a contract extension that many were hoping he would eventually get. And I think those conversations were muddled a little bit by what was a very subpar playoffs by his standards, and the standards he established during the regular season. And then the fact that he got hurt and didn't really have a chance to turn it around in that Miami Heat series. I think if things had continued how they were looking, he might have gotten something in the neighborhood of 4 years, $110 million. And I think now the Knicks are probably rightfully coming back from him saying like, hey, you were awesome, but it's kind of a small sample size here of you being this good. He's never going to be the starting point guard in New York because Jalen Brunson's there. Even though the lineups with him and Brunson have blown teams out of the water, they've been about plus 20 per 100 possessions, like some of the best lineups in all of basketball with the two of them playing together. I just don't think the Knicks organization and Tom Thibodeau, that in particular, kind of fetishizes having size at every position, like really has the appetite to play the two of them together long term, which I think complicates stuff because Quickley, I noted it, but I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but put up something like 24 points, 6 assists, 5 rebounds on like 48, 37, like 88 shooting as a starter. Like he has every right to say like, hey, like I think I should be a starter. And I want the next contract I get at 28, 29 years old to be in the neighborhood of, I don't know, like $40 million a year, which sounds crazy. But if he put those numbers up full time on that efficiency while being one of the best defensive guards in basketball, like he would have a case for it. So I could see a situation where he's asking to go to an organization where he'll have a bigger role, and Milwaukee would be perfect for that. Could start next to Drew Holiday for a year or two and eventually take over that spot and be maybe the second banana to Giannis. I think that might be overtaxing him a little bit, but if you're looking at a team with championship aspirations, like if he's your third guy, I see that as a very reasonable ceiling for him. I think it's hard to overrate what he does defensively for teams. Like the Knicks were just infinitely better with him on that end of the floor. He's just a brilliant player defensively, little streaky at times as a shooter, but he is awesome, near and dear to my heart, and Milwaukee would be very lucky to have him.
Oh, it's very fascinating because this is the question the Bucks will have with this, again, 2029 first that I already mentioned. If you are trading for a guy that is going to have to get paid, it complicates things a little bit. But certainly for the Bucks and an aging team, young guard, it's an exciting prospect.
I think the only issue there is to that point, like it's hard for me to see the Knicks making a move that makes them worse in the present. They would only do it if there was no hope or little hope of quickly coming back. They see long-term that he just has no desire to be the best sixth man in the NBA and would rather like take a shot at being like, I don't know, the 12th or 13th best starting point guard in the league, which money-wise would make a lot of sense. And I think the other way the Knicks could talk themselves into it is It would be, again, weird to do it with Milwaukee because that would be one of the stars they want to go after. But if they think in a star trade that 2029 Bucks pick is a better asset than Immanuel Quickley, and they would want to turn it around quickly, or maybe, no pun intended, and make it a 3-team deal, or shortly trade that pick, I think that's where the Knicks could talk themselves into it. But I'd be surprised if they did it this year because they're just such a better team when Quickley's on the court. And even with adding DiVincenzo, which, as I noted earlier, maybe a little insurance against that idea, like there's no way they're a better team losing Immanuel Quickley for a draft pick.
It's going to be interesting. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see where the Knicks land this season as well, and whether either team looks to make some moves. The Bucks obviously are going to be in the news throughout the season, I would say. Let us know what you thought about today's podcast in the comments for both shows. Make sure you check out Locked On Bucks and Locked On Knicks. Subscribe, rate, review, do all those things. Gavin, hopefully we didn't annoy too many people today talking about Giannis. It's a dangerous topic to discuss.
You know what? If we've each annoyed a few of our own fans, I think we're doing it just right, Kane.
That might be the case. All right, Locked On Bucks and Locked On Knicks will continue tomorrow, and we're building up to the preseason, which is only about a week or so away, which is, let's be honest, we're thankful here doing daily podcasts at Locked On that we're going to have some games to talk about. So we're going to look forward to that. As I said, make sure you continue to support the shows. For Gavin and myself, we'll speak to you guys tomorrow.